3, 2. Oh, jeez Louise. So this is going to be a special episode because I'm going to be talking about a mini series that I should have read when I was growing up, loving comics, but I never did. And I just recently found the same series in the library, picked it up, read it, and I really enjoyed it. So I kind of want to dissect why I didn't read it that first time around and look at it a little bit more closely on this episode of My Wednesday Comics. So the series I'm talking about is The Death of Superman. I never read it. I don't know why. Granted, I grew up loving Marvel more than DC all my childhood, so that's probably a big reason. But I mean, come on, it's Superman, for Pete's sake. So I don't know why. That's part of the reason why I'm doing this video, is to kind of dissect my brain. I don't know if it was the art style, the character I wasn't attached to, but I just had no desire to read the book. But the surprising thing is, when I read it just recently, I really enjoyed it. So I'm totally confused, but I think there's probably some key factors in there, and let's look at it closely and figure this out. Okay, are we ready for this? The Death of Superman. Again, this is a benchmark moment in comics, and it was something that I totally skipped as a kid. This was in 1992, I believe, is when this first came out. And so this is at the height of Image Comics and kind of the fever that was building up. And I think that honestly was a big reason I was distracted from what was going on. But what I do remember is there was definitely a heightened excitement about this issue coming out from collectors because they knew it was a big deal. So getting your hands on one was going to be a big deal. And for somebody like me, who at the time was a kid, I wasn't even sure if I would be able to get my hands on one because I didn't have access to local comic book store at the time and my own money. And so yeah, I didn't even know if I could get my hands on an issue. And I was more of a Marvel guy. So anything from DC really had to catch my attention. Now, this is the death of Superman, so you'd think this would catch my attention, but it didn't. The amazing thing about this series here is that it is woven in through several titles of DC that are related to Superman. Superman, the Man of Steel, Justice League America, Superman proper, The Adventures of Superman, and then Superman in Action Comics. So that's a lot of titles to interweave a crossover. Marvel did that with Fall of the Mutants and Inferno and Mutant Massacre. So it's not like I wasn't familiar with that concept, but you definitely had to be a serious collector to get all the pieces of the puzzle. Probably another reason why I didn't try. I knew that if I just got the one issue where Superman dies, which I think I did get, that I probably wouldn't be able to get the full story. So that might have been another detractor of me reading this. There's a whole bunch of writers here. Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, Louise Simonson, Roger Stern, all established writers, comic book writers, both in DC and Marvel, I've seen. And then the pencilers are John Bogdanov, Tom Grummett, Jackson Geiss, Dan Jurgens himself as well, inkers Brett Breeding, Rick Burchett, Doug Hazelwood, Dennis Janke, and Dennis Rodier. And then finally the colorists Gene D'Angelo and Glenn Whitmore. These are all known names in comic books, and I wouldn't expect any less for them to stack the deck for such a big tentpole event. However, 92 was also the same time that Image was starting, and so those were all the hot artists that were in the market at the time that were garnering so much attention. None of those artists were on Superman. I think that was another factor. I was definitely enamored by the Image movement, and all those artists, I had followed them through their Marvel runs. So that's where my attention, that's where my money, that's where my collecting went, into their titles. So it's great. This starts off with Doomsday punching a wall, and it's just this rhythmic punching over and over and over again. And as he's punching, you see these spikes start forming in his hand, and you get this feeling like this is not a regular dude. Something's going up. He's mutating or whatever. He's very threatening. But it's awesome. It's a great comic book storytelling device just to build up tension and anticipation of something happening. And then these last panels here of like he's breaking through this wall. It's really a great way to start it. And then here at the final panel here, he busts through. You just see his fist fully mutated with the claws and all that. It says Doomsday is here. So you get the picture. So this first issue in the series is from Superman, the Man of Steel. Louise Simonson is the writer, John Bogdanove, the artist, and Dennis Janke is the inker. John Bogdanove is a great artist. I remember his work from Power Pack and some other titles as well. But he's got a really fun, exaggerated style. Right here, he's already got the fist motif going, and Doomsday busts out of the ground, and then he kind of mirrors that with Superman's pose on this size. But I love his Superman. It's really I've seen a lot of people comment that John Bogdanove is one of their favorite Superman artists, and you can see why here. It seems like he's trying to mirror Superman and Doomsday here. This angle feels a little awkward to me. I kind of wish it was almost identical to Superman's, but flipped. But you get the idea of what's going on. And remember, I'm kind of coming cold. I don't really know much about Doomsday, his past, his history, and more of those details are revealed as you read. The cool thing that is interwoven in a lot of this series is not just the epic fight between Doomsday and Superman, but also the human aspect of it. And so this kid kind of represents one of it. He's like trying to figure out what happened to his mom, who he thinks is dead. And he's trying to get the attention of the news and also Superman himself. This page right here is something I do remember from this series. I think this was in so many advertisements and so many like previews to introduce Doomsday and show how not a good dude he is. So literally he holds out his hand for this bird to land in it and he kills it. Blorch. They do this a lot, and you'll see this in the series where Doomsday's dialogue is not in a typical comic book balloon, but it's just kind of lettered outside here. I mean, it distinguishes Doomsday from everybody else, but it also was a little distracting for me because usually when you see letters like this, you think of sound effects. It doesn't quite fit with the scene. So like here he is crushing this bird. This is the sound effect Blorch, and then he's laughing here, but you can't really see his expression. So it's just a little bit of a disconnect there. They're kind of setting up, like you just feel already immediately Doomsday is coming. Doomsday is coming. And that is the overall vibe that permeates this book. John Bogdanove draws great figures, great human figures, really complicated poses here. Not even necessary. I'd say this is a pretty dynamic pose for Lois Lane to be kicking somebody. And right here, I really love this pose here of her grabbing her leg because she just kicked like this rock alien guy. But this is such an awkward pose, but he nails it, and it's so natural, and you can tell that he just has a great command of the figure. This was an interesting page, and so the things that I'm going to point out are just things that we're like, oh, if they just tweaked that a little bit, thought it could be stronger. I don't like to necessarily nitpick people's artwork. Like, who am I compared to these established comic book artists? But just my opinion on mainly storytelling things and layout things that I feel like could have strengthened the moment. So for example, in this page here, I feel like there could have been a greater distinction between small, medium, and large moments to build up the tension. They show this tree, beautifully rendered tree, and this itty bitty Doomsday back here, just kind of chilling in the tree. And then the next thing you know, he punches the tree in this very dynamic, explosive punch. But he's so tiny in frame here. And then here he's huge, like hacking at the tree, the rest of the tree. So what they're trying to convey is like, Doomsday is really strong. This like 1,000-year oak tree that's sitting there is no match for him. In one swipe, he can destroy it, which is cool. I almost feel like he didn't even need to be in this panel. And if you just started on a shot of the tree, and then you see this fist or, you know, a silhouetted figure crack through it like that, and then we get the reveal here, you get a little bit of progression. This was just a kind of a weird moment here, like him hanging out here. It makes him feel really tiny next to such a large tree. And I feel like just taking him out of that would have given it a little bit more impact. This is cool. This is almost like a Kirby-esque kind of spread here with this weird alien tech and these creatures all over. Double page spread. Definitely feels like it's influenced by Jack Kirby. Bogdanov also has kind of a cartooniness to his drawing style, which you can see in this page right here. Almost pushes it a little too far in my opinion. Because you want to build up this serious event, and then this almost feels like a Looney Tunes moment where Superman kind of shoves a grenade in this alien's mouth, and then it blows up in his mouth, and he kind of gets knocked out. I'm having the luxury of reading this in one go as a graphic novel, but if you can imagine having to wait month to month, at the quickest bi-monthly maybe, but I think it was month to month issues. It's really a slow burn, but it just builds in that anticipation of what's going to happen next. This was kind of an odd page here. It shows Doomsday here in the foreground. Something happens. It looks like he grabs the side of a beam or something, and then the next thing, the bridge falls. But here he is, really tiny, kind of laughing to himself with the non-bubbled dialogue next to a huge sound effect. So it's all really weird. I feel like they needed to make it a clearer setup of what he was doing to the bridge, which was knocking it over and kind of causing all this destruction, and not be kind of jammed here in the middle of it. This is a great interaction here. A truck comes and, you know, the driver sees Doomsday crossing the street. He's like, hey, wait, get out of the way. And then the truck rams into Doomsday. I feel like this would have benefited from a side angle. Got a little pad here. But this could have benefited from just making this more of a profile shot. I love the dynamic angle that Bogdanov picked to draw, but I feel like Doomsday gets really jammed in there in the back, and you don't get to see like kind of the effect of and the size and proportion of what's going on. So if they did it more like a side angle, you know, and then there's like huge sound effect or whatever, I feel like that could have been a little bit clearer what was going on. So then this next issue is Justice League of America, again under the Doomsday banner. And so now we see that they're starting to introduce the Justice League, the current Justice League, to fight against him. This is Dan Jurgens and Rick Burchett are doing the art and writing on this. And I really liked Dan Jurgens' style on this one. He draws figures very well. He draws the characters really well. He's got some great faces and expressions. So this particular story, Superman is being interviewed on a talk show. Meanwhile, the Justice League is trying to intercept Doomsday, and they're getting these rumblings of like, oh, there's this some side guy is coming and destroying things. We got to stop him, as the Justice League would do. They like to juxtapose Doomsday with innocent animals and how he totally like slaughters them, which is an immediate signal to the reader that he is not a good guy. This was one panel that I wanted to call out as far as storytelling goes. So they have, he breaks the neck of this deer. He's laughing. He sees the ship come from the Justice League. These are his eyes, a reflection of the ship. He picks up a piece of wood, and I feel like this could have been flipped in the opposite direction, because he's throwing the wood piece this way, but then in the next page, it's coming and flying this way. So I just feel like if the direction of him throwing it this way would have carried over better this way, just if they flopped that panel. This is great figures, great expressions, and all this chaos is happening, and while Superman is being interviewed still. Meanwhile, the Justice League is starting to interact with Doomsday, and now we get the battle of the team versus Doomsday. This is awesome. This is a really great silhouette, dark shadow version of Doomsday. One of the things I didn't know, and I just started noticing probably at this point in the story, is that Doomsday has one of his arms chained to his back or tied to his back with this contraption, probably because he just was in prison and they didn't explain it at all. Again, maybe if I was reading previous issues, I would have already known that, but for somebody just stepping into it, I was like, oh, one of his arms is not free. So he's been one-armed this whole time. And then for 1992, they go there without, as far as characters getting the snot beat out of them. So we're already getting the feeling like this is not going to be a great fight. This is going to be tough. if all our superheroes are starting to get beat up. So they all take their turns attacking him, trying different things, and realizing that they can't beat him. But I really like the writing here and just the pacing of it. It felt great. It was neat to see Superman trying to interact with this audience, this TV audience, and be respectful and be the hero that he's supposed to be, while the Justice League is getting totally destroyed by Doomsday. A couple of these poses were a little odd for me. Like I felt like some of the earlier poses of things that didn't need to be so dynamic were super dynamic, and then in this moment here where Bloodwind is getting punched into this silo or this tank, his pose was a little soft. So I felt like that, that could have been a little bit more of a huge pose here. And then, he's just one by one kind of taking care of the Justice League. I would have loved this as a kid. This kind of seriousness, this kind of desperation. It's very effective. This was a funny panel. Again, some sort of, I feel like, tweaks to like set up and then payoff based on the panel layouts. Could have made some of these moments stronger. So right here, he grabs Bloodwind's foot and then throws him. He hits Maxima, and then they're way down here in this panel, this tiny panel here, and this explosion. So it was really confusing a little bit of what was happening. I mean, you get the idea that they're getting beat up, but I feel like the action could have been told a little bit stronger there. This weird sound effect placement here. They're not afraid to show blood and pain. This was a really odd moment for me too. The fist kind of about to hit Booster in the face, but it looks like it's just sitting there. It's not like moving fast. So I think we could have done better with more speed lines or feathering or something to show the speed of the moment. And this really huge punch. And the punch is going this way, but then the follow through is going this way. So it's a little bit of a disconnect. This is cool. He's flying in midair and he gets yanked and grabbed by a hand. And then you see this full body pose of Superman holding him and saying like, okay, now it's on. Superman's here. So here's Superman proper, again, under the Doomsday banner. This is story and art by Dan Jurgens and finish art by Brett Breeding. I really like this issue too. I really like the art in this issue. Dan Jurgens is a solid artist, And he definitely comes from that school, that classic school of knowing how to draw the human form more realistically. In this issue, they introduce this side character, this human character who's having this interaction with his mom. You can tell they have a strained relationship. It's a very human aspect inserted into a very epic story. So it gives you a second to pause, to breathe, to feel, to kind of understand these characters, learn a little bit more about these characters, and then they're thrown into the throes of this fight of superheroes. And so when you insert Doomsday into that, then all of a sudden you get worried about these characters. Oh no, they're going to get hurt. And that's exactly what they do with them. So here's the first time Superman is touched by Doomsday, who just punches him. And this is such a hero moment of like, yeah, Superman, he's the strongest guy on the planet. And so even though Doomsday has been creating all this destruction, our hero is here. But it quickly goes south. This is such a weird leg raise. Superman gets kicked out. I love this moment. Gets kicked and he flies through the house, out the house, into the tree. I almost feel like if this pose was here in the middle and this pose was a little bit more on the left, we'd get this progression of left, center, right, as opposed to center, right. And then Booster Gold is wrecked and Doomsday just keeps coming. I love his little goggles. They use this a lot in storytelling device as like seeing the reflection in it. It makes him creepy where you can't see his expression. And yet when they do stuff like this, these kind of close-up panels, you get that he's looking, that's what he's looking at. And then he totally punches her. I wish we saw more of her figure here so you made that connection, but you kind of get the idea. Then the Justice League and Superman just kind of unleash their powers on Doomsday at this point. They're like, let's just stop this guy. Throw everything you got at him. Here we start seeing Doomsday's mask open up and we see the creature beneath. Also, his arm that was tied behind his back is now free. And that was a moment that I lost while I was reading. I didn't quite catch that while I was reading, and I felt like they could have shown that happen, like either the cable break or just called it out a little bit so that when his second arm comes out, you get the idea. One of the things I was thinking about when I was wondering why didn't I read Death of Superman when I was younger was Doomsday's design. I wasn't 100% into it. And even looking at it now, like, it's cool and it's all these like bones and claws coming out of his face. They're interesting and they're neat. I really like the costume version here, but revealing the monster underneath is a great idea. But in this day and age of the early 90s and everything that was coming out with Image, I feel like they needed to trick him out a little bit more, like more claws, more bones, just make him a little bit more alien. Right now he feels a little bit like a dark side kind of alien, which is very humanoid looking. And I feel like it would be cool if he was in this costume, you thought he was humanoid, but then as it got torn up and revealed more and more underneath, he was really alien. Maybe that was part of it, like his design didn't capture me as a young boy when I was seeing all these super stylized things coming out of the Image guys. So that might have been another reason why I didn't jump to read this book. I was so superficial as a kid. So this guy that they set up and his mom, he was having a fight with his mom and who has a little baby as well. Now they're in danger. And it's an awesome setup for Superman in particular to come and save it. And this guy is like yelling, Superman, save my kid, save my family, save my family. And Superman has to chase after Doomsday because Doomsday is heading towards more people and going to cause more destruction. So you have this decision point for him of, do I save the one family or do I save the masses? Which is an awesome conflict for somebody like Superman, which you can imagine. They've done that story point many times, but it was a really great part of the story that they put in here and they gave it time to play out. They even end this issue with him, you know, almost getting overwhelmed by the smoke and fire, and Superman right at the heels, literally, of Doomsday. What is he going to do? So now we move on to Adventures of Superman. And this one was Jerry Ordway and Tom Grummett and Doug Hazelwood were the creative team. Tom Grummett was penciler, Doug Hazelwood inker, and Jerry Ordway was the writer. Each time they're kind of setting up what happened in the previous issue from the other series and continuing on with the action. This is an awesome splash page. I love it. Great pose, great getting hit pose by Doomsday. And Superman's in a dilemma. He doesn't know what to do, but at the same time, he's getting punched in the face by this crazy, powerful villain. And what does Superman do? He comes back, as Superman always does, and he rescues the mom and the baby. And then Doomsday continues on, causing more havoc, blowing things up. You see Doomsday kind of getting more and more closer to more people, and your heart just kind of races a little bit more because you realize, oh no, he's unstoppable and he's heading towards more people that he can hurt. And that's the tension that the story is building up, and it's also like causing Superman to make these decisions. Do I save these people or do I stop him now? And I can't do both. And it's great. It's a great conflict for a hero to have. And every time you think that Superman's getting the upper hand, Doomsday just keeps coming back and causing more destruction. Love this panel. I love how big it is. I love how it's in silhouette and how huge. I think the sound effects could have been even bigger, but it's just a great moment where there's a gas leak and then a spark and then this huge explosion here. Probably could have even bled out of this frame to make it really feel like it's coming out. So here's Superman in Action Comics, and another team. Roger Stern's the writer, Jackson Geiss and Dennis Rodier are the artists. It's, even though they have so many teams, I feel like as a whole, it all holds together and feels in the same world, very similar. So I love that. It's not like Doomsday looks dramatically different from artist to artist or Superman. So I really like the consistency there that they kept. He finds out about Metropolis on this ad on TV. This is a problem here that I felt like was a coloring problem. And when I saw this, I was like, what is this guy doing in the supermarket? Like, who is he? And I realized that Doomsday's watching TV, he's watching a show on here, and that could have easily been solved with color. And it made me think about the whole series. And actually that is for me, one of the weakest parts of this whole series through issue to issue was the coloring. No offense to the colorists, but I just feel like after I hit this moment and I started looking back at the series up to this point, I just felt like it was color by numbers and that the color did nothing to really establish mood or time of day or tone at all in the series. And I think that hurt it a little bit. It felt like everything took place in the daytime, 12 noon, everything, Superman's colors were always the same all the time. There was no gravity to it. There was no shift or progression. It was just like, oh yeah, this is Superman's colors. This is Doomsday's colors. And I feel like color could have helped so much, like even make the intense moments more intense, or the sad moments more sad, or the exciting moments more exciting. And none of that really happened here. So that's a big mark against the series for me, was the color. And it's pretty much true all the way to the end. So here is the organization, the Cadmus Project, that has something to do with the creation of Doomsday. Again, maybe it was established earlier in earlier issues, but this was my first time reading about it. But it's pretty clear that they are involved in it. So that's why they send Guardian to try and circumvent the situation. If anything, they don't want to be found out that this was their creation. great, huge, epic scale here. I love this fight, this location that they're fighting in, these big logs crashing down. But see here, like, this is an example of color. It's like, okay, this is a sign color, and it gets slammed here, and it's really like, oh no, he's heading to Metropolis, and it should feel more like darker. I'd see, like in the shade here or something, but no, it's the same color as it is at the beginning. So my mood is totally the same when I'm reading it from this panel to this panel, even though it's so different in the story. And then Superman, the Man of Steel. And we go back to John Bogdanove drawing. Look at this crazy drawing of this guy getting his neck snapped. It's really odd and out of place and kind of gruesome. But the colors are like, hey, it's like, let's go get some lunch and let's go break this guy's neck. This is awesome. Awesome splash page. Classic Bogdanove expression. This is a really good pose. It's kind of not finished here, the drawing, but maybe that was the intent. But I just love it. It has a lot of impact. This is very classic Bogdanove. These like forced perspective, kind of anatomy. I do think Bogdanove starts to mutate him a little bit more, which is cool, but I feel like they could have pushed it way farther to make him that much more threatening. This is an awesome moment of an explosion, and I just feel like the framing is off. If they just redrew this, here's the tripping foot on the wire. Guy trips on the wires. You see the spark, right? And then this explosion should be centered. You can have the little silhouettes that they have flying. These silhouettes here in the middle. And the buildings here blowing up or whatever. But it's all the way here out to the edge, which was a really weird choice, I thought. It's like the center part here is the smoke, and I don't know, it just felt odd. Here's another odd framing. I love the posing, but I didn't really pick up on what was going on until I looked closely, and he's stabbing with his bony protrusions, his elbow bone. He's stabbing Superman in the gut, which is awesome. But yeah, it just felt really, it didn't read totally with the framing of that pose. Awesome expression, great expression. Here's some more epic poses from Bogdanove. I love this. Everybody just kind of laying it out against Doomsday, trying to stop him. He's just unstoppable. And that's a scary thing. That's a scary thing for villains, to be unstoppable. I really love this moment here with Superman punching Doomsday in the face, but I feel like it could have been posed out a little bit more impactful, and Bogdanove for sure has the capability of doing that. But if you can imagine like Superman's fists being really huge in frame, and then Doomsday's face like getting like punched, it would like twist his head. Here's the fist, really big, and then Superman, maybe his arms more stretched out or whatever. Superman's yelling back here, but just like more impact. You could have spittle coming out or whatever, blood, more impact there. Just feels like it's a little tight here in that space. And then we get to this issue, Superman. This is it, the death of Superman. I remember this cover very distinctly. It's a great cover, really kind of ominous, and you know what you're getting when you're picking up this book. So one thing I quickly noticed when I started it is every page is a splash page. this is like a technique that, at least for me, I don't think it was the first time done, but for me, I saw Walt Simonson do this in Thor, where Thor is fighting the Midgard serpent, and every page is a splash page, and it just makes it super epic. So I think they're trying to do and I believe it came out before this, and I think they're trying to do the same thing here to varying degrees of success, I'd say. I had mentioned earlier that I felt like Superman was consistent and Doomsday was consistent from issue to issue to issue, but it's really weird. In this issue, I feel like there's a lot of inconsistencies between how Superman's drawn and how Doomsday is drawn, and I'm not 100% sure why. This is a really weird pose for Superman. I get what they're trying to show, but it's a really odd pose. This leg here has an odd tangent with this arm, and so not quite sure what I'm looking at. I almost feel like this leg should be out here, or this arm should be down here a little bit more. This is a cool angle, cool helicopter. Great helicopter here, great Superman pose. So yeah, the thing that I feel like the Thor issue with that Simonson did, I feel like from page to page to page, even though they were each splash pages, the storytelling was solid and you could follow what was going on. Here it feels like I'm almost looking at cover images from a bunch of different books that have to do with Superman, but they don't link together. Like, I don't know how we get from here to here easily, or it didn't make sense as far as storytelling. Maybe it's not supposed to, but it definitely threw me off. Or from like here to here, like what's Jimmy Olsen doing? And Lois's hair went crazy here, and it's really romantic here, and Superman looks different here. So all these pages are jumping all over the place as far as style. I don't know if they had different artists do each page. Maybe they did. I didn't look too closely. And then this Superman looks really different and really weird pose. So kind of started coming off the seams a little bit. But the feeling I got was this huge battle. Everything was a big deal. Each page was a big deal. So I like the idea that they picked of doing every page a splash page. I just wish the execution tied him together and a more coherent story. Superman, he gets jammed here, but then where did he go? Is he underground? I guess so, because he busts up here. So yeah, and where are they in space? It just kind of flips around a lot. And here he's like, it's a really dynamic angle here, but then here it's kind of flat. And where's Lois? Where's his legs? Yeah, so it's a little bit all over the place. This is an interesting angle, but I don't know why we're seeing it this way. And then this is really tight on Doomsday kneeing Superman in the chin, and you would think it would be like a bigger impact, but it just kind of nicked it. Just gave him a little bit of a shaving cut with his bony knee. This is cool. It's cool. But again, they just feel like pinups and not connected moments. This was a really weird drawing here. This one felt very off. Like the anatomy is really off. The posing was really off. And we're focusing on Daily Planet, I guess, as opposed to what's happening there. Very odd. I didn't like this page. Again, weird pose. I know what they're trying to do, but very weird. So they got painted in the corner quite a bit in this last issue. I love this page. This is like a pinup or a cover right here. Seeing the reflection of what Jimmy Olsen's taking a picture of in his camera lens. Nice. Is this a adult or a kid? Very odd. This is a great spread. Classic image. And then this is kind of like the camera moved over a little bit. So a little disconnected. And that's a little bit insensitive there, Jimmy. But it's a dramatic moment nonetheless. And see here, I feel like Doomsday's design, these were made later. but I feel like Doomsday's design is a lot cooler here. I feel like he could be even more, like make it more extreme, but definitely felt more alien than some of the earlier drawings. That's a cool Superman. So yeah, as I was going through this and reading it, things I did enjoy outweighed the things that I thought I didn't like about it. But for sure, the colors were a big deal, almost to the point where like I want to take some of these pages and recolor them. I might do that. But I think the colors were a big deal about this, and Doomsday's design for sure. Oh, and another point is I wish that Superman would have used all of his powers or all the tricks in the book. So he used his heat vision at one point, and obviously his strength and flying, but I wish we saw him use his super cold breath or like ran around the world 50 times or just something. Like I wish more of those kind of Superman power moves, just because this was his death. But that was just kind of a small story point that I thought as I was trying to think of why didn't I read this. So I think if I knew the things that I knew about this book back then, I would have picked it up, and I had the means to do it. I would have picked it up, but I'm glad that I discovered it now, later in life, and glad that I can look through it in a lens different from when I was a kid, but still enjoy it as an adult, because it's classic. It's the death of Superman, kind of a very memorable moment in the history of mainstream comics. So there you go, the death of Superman. I feel like for such an iconic mainstay character for DC, they did a pretty good job of like weaving that story within several books and having it build to this massive climax. I think if I had to go back in time and talk to my teenage self, I would say, hey, you should read this book. It's good. And for the reasons we talked about just now in the flip through, you should look past those and kind of lean into this because it's a good read. The ways that characters are handled now in modern day comics, I don't think the respect of what an impact this character dying could be replicated now. Now, this was just the death of Superman, and I know that there's the funeral for a friend, I think was the next series, and then Reign of Superman, which I wasn't a big fan of all the different Supermen that came back and the whole mystery around that. That didn't appeal to me. Maybe for some of the similar reasons I didn't pick up a Death of Superman. So I'm going to be looking for those in the library to see if I like them. But yeah, I was really impressed with this. I kept reading every issue and was expecting it to turn me off and for me to put it away, and just found myself going, oh, I want to know more. I want to know more. And I love that about comics that are done well. If they can get you on that hook, get you invested in the story and the characters, then you'll just come back for the next issue. It was really eye-opening for me just to have to articulate why young adolescent teenage Rocky didn't gravitate towards this. Now that I know what I know, I have a different feeling about this series. Let me know what you think. I want to know, how did everybody else feel about this? Did you get into Death of Superman? Was it just me? Was it the Marvel DC thing? I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe if you can, if you enjoyed this content or any of the other content that I'm putting out there. And I look forward to doing this again soon. Take care. Boom.